All right, today we are going to get into the song Someone Like You. I guess we can't quite see that on the page, but Someone Like You is the song that we're looking at today by Adele, of course. What we're going to do today is just take a look at what chords are happening in the song and decipher, break apart the chords, figure out what notes belong to each chord, identify what those are, and then we're also going to go through and talk about how the melody is fitting over all those chords and why does the melody make sense? Why do we have some nice, almost like dissonant notes in the melody and things like that? So let's go ahead and dive in. Very first thing we need to talk about here is the key signature. So that's going to be pretty huge. You can grab my iPad here. So we are going to be looking at the very beginning of every single line. That is what I mean by the key signature. And that's going to be huge as we go along here. Every single time you start a new song, we just have to know what key we're in, or you at least need to know the sharps or the flats that you're watching out for, whether or not you know what key that is. So here, if we analyze what those notes are, I'm going to zoom back in here. If we analyze what those notes are, again, we're just going to think about like some note sayings here. So you can think every good boy does fine for the treble clef lines. Let's go ahead and do that first. So our very first sharp we need to find is this guy here. So again, we're going to think every good boy does fine. And that tells us we have an F sharp is the very first sharp we need to think of. Okay. Then the other saying that we can think of in the treble clef is F-A-C-E. So here we're going to think F-A-C. So we know that that next note is going to be C sharp. And I would jot these down before we get into it, just to make sure you have in your mind, okay, I got to watch out for every F sharp, every single C sharp. And let's find the last one. So for this last one, we're going to go back to our lines because that's the closest note to that very, very top note. So again, we're going to think every good boy does fine. Here's our F. And then if we just think up one more, then that's going to give us a G. Okay. So we are going to have G sharp. That's a G there. G sharp as our other note to make that look a little bit better. There we go. Okay, so we need to think about that the entire way through. And in fact, if you want to go through and just erase some of those, if you want to go through and mark all those C sharps, F sharps, and G sharps, I would suggest doing something along those lines just to make sure we don't miss any of those as we're walking through this today. So what that would look like, basically, also note here too that this guy here is going to be a C. Now, even though our sharp is all the way up there on the top C, this one down here is still sharp because it's a C. Just wherever these notes are, again, whether it's an F, C, or G, wherever they're at on the staff, it means they are going to be sharp. Okay, great. Let's see, I'm gonna get rid of that. So basically what you might want to add in on your music is just plugging in sharps on some of those C's. Our general rule for sharps is they're going to carry through, so you could just plug one in, or if you want to keep track of all those, of course, you can add those in. So, okay, awesome. That's the main thing we need to talk about before we dive in here. Then what we're going to do is figure out, in fact, here, I'll go ahead and write in these first few notes. So if you're still kind of getting a handle on reading notes and identifying what they are, this section here is going to help that out. So we're just going to walk through and figure out what these first few notes are. And we're just going to be looking at this here. Now, I get a lot of questions. Do we need to look at both the right hand and the left hand, or can we just look at one of those and find the answer? Sometimes you can get away with just looking at one hand, but always your hands are going to be matching up together. So if the right hand is, let's say, on a C chord, for example, your left hand is also going to be on some sort of C chord, okay, or just, notes of the C chord. So yes, we are going to look at both hands today. All right, let's see. So again, just looking at that circled section, but I'm going to go ahead and erase that. So we just need to figure out some notes here to start. If we look at the bass clef down here, we just need spaces for the bass clef. Our saying that I usually use is all cows eat grass. So we're just going to think all for that one. So there's an A for that very bottom note. The next one is going to be an E, right? All cows eat. Then we just need our treble clef notes. Whoops. I have already told you that this guy here is a C. Right? So we know that that's a C. We can kind of anchor everything else based on the C. So let's take a look at the very first note, for example. So if we know that that's a C on that line, we want to think, okay, like here's the C on the line. A note right below the C would be a B. Okay, so that would be in the space there. And then our next line, is going to be the A. Okay, so this one here is the A. And get rid of some of that. So writing an A there. Awesome. The next one we've already talked about, so that's going to be a C sharp. Then this one, the next one up, you can think like Every Good Boy Does Fine, or you can walk it up from the C. There could be a couple different ways to get yourself there. I would probably just do Every Good Boy Does Fine, in which case we know that it's an E because it's the very first line. Great. We could look at the next note as well, but we can see that that's just another C sharp, right? So that is what we need. If you know anything about chords, you might already be able to identify this, but let's just find those notes on the piano. So we're going to go all the way down here. Here's my middle C just as a reference. Okay, I'm going to go all the way down to this low A is where the first note is placed. The next note up is going to be the E. So the E, if you're not familiar with notes, that's going to be right above the set of two black notes. So there's your left hand shape. We can see that the right hand also has an A and an E, so let's go ahead and get that set up. Okay, and then we just need the C sharp in the middle. Now, always what I do is we just need to condense this down as much as we can. So there's like the overall shape for our chord, but we need to take this and get rid of doubles. Now, since I have more in my right hand, I'm going to actually get rid of my left hand. And because I have both the A and the E in both hands, I'm just going to straight up get rid of my left hand. Okay, then we're left with our A, C sharp, and E. Now, if you're not sure whether or not that's in root position, what I suggest is get rid of all the sharps. Okay, get rid of all the black notes, put everything down to all the white notes. So just get rid of that C sharp. Then we can see that everything is stacked like that, right? We're just skipping every other note there. So that tells us we are in root position. Okay, if it was something like this where we've got like two notes in between, that would tell us we need to reconfigure the chord. But here we're in root position, so we're all set. If we move that middle finger back to the sharp, okay, that is our chord. Now again, the question might be, is this an A? We know that it's an A because we're in root position. That's what we just figured out. Is this A major or minor? Okay, and here's what we can do, and we can keep this in mind through the rest of the lesson. You might even want to jot this down. If it's a major chord, we're going to have 4 half steps between the bottom note and the middle note. So here, we aren't going to count the bottom note in this context, but we are going to count the next half step up. So that would be 1, 2, 3, and 4. So because there's 4 there, that gives us a major chord. So our answer here, again, we just took that as 1, 2, 3, 4. So our answer here is A major for this chord. Okay, and the way that we're going to write that is literally just an A. Okay, show you that. So let me zoom out and show you how this usually will look. So right on top of the staff, we're just going to write A. Okay, and zoom in so you can see that. My A looks a little funny. Let me do that one more time. There we go. Okay, you could also add that on the bottom of the staff. I do that a lot as well, just to keep, like, you can see, of course, we're writing on top of moderate ballad. So you could write underneath as well. Just kind of depends on how you want to read that. Usually, if you have a piece of music, though, it's going to be written on top. So if you just want to get used to that, that would be great. All right, awesome. Then we just play that. If I just, play that whole measure there, we do the exact same thing through the whole measure. Okay, you can even see I'm holding my pedal down so you can't see each individual note, but we're just playing those until we get to the end of the measure, excuse me. Then we're going to switch notes. Okay, so let's go back. Let's figure out what our next few notes are. So that whole first measure is A. And one thing, I don't know how clear I was on this, but if it is major, we'll just write the letter. If it's anything like minor, then we're going to add the M. Okay, that's our official way of doing that. If you do want to indicate that it's major for yourself and just write major, that's totally fine. Or you could just write M-A-J. You could also add a capital M versus the lowercase m. That's like what you do a lot of times in college to indicate the difference between the two. So, okay, awesome. Looking at the second measure here. So now we're just going to break down this set of notes there, still keeping in mind F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. Okay, those guys are still in play, of course. So let's go ahead and do the left hand first. Left hand, again, our line saying is going to be good burritos don't fall apart is what I usually like to use. And then we've also got all cows eat grass for the spaces. So here, good burritos don't fall apart. So that right there is going to be a G. So you can just add G down there. Great. The next note up, we need a space note. So we're going to think all cows eat grass. So all cows eat is what we're getting. So we've got G and E. Keep in mind G sharp. I almost forgot that. So G sharp for that guy. Okay, then let's work backwards here through these three notes because that low ledger line is tough to grab. So again, for treble clef, we want to think every good boy does fine is kind of our typical one to use. There's also different ones. Elephants get big dirty feet is what a lot of my kids students likes to use. Those are kind of the main ones that I use, but every good boy does fine, and that's totally fine to use. So we know that that very first one is going to be an E. We did already look at this note here, right? That's going to match up exactly with this guy. So that one there is still going to be a C sharp. You'll notice that the E and the C sharp carry through, right? So keep that in mind here. Then we just need to figure out this very last note. Now, what we can do is we could take a look at this guy and compare that one with this one. Right? What is the difference between those two notes? Kind of easy to see when you do look at those two together. So we know, I'll do it here. So we know that this guy here is the A, and then we just need to step that down one, right? So if we look at the A, if we step that down one, we can see that we get to a G, and again, with our key signature, we just need to think G sharp. Clean this up just a little bit. Great. So G sharp for that one there. Okay. Awesome. So then we just need to find those notes on the piano. So again, we're kind of living down here in the left hand. I'm going to go ahead and pop that pinky down to the G sharp. Okay. You know what? I'm getting kind of low down here. I'm going to go ahead and pop things up the octave, actually, just so you make sure we can see everything. So again, A and E. Then I'm going to move my pinky down to the sharp. Keep the E in the left hand. Okay, then the right hand comes up. We did have A, C sharp, and E. Now I'm literally just going to take the thumb and pop it down to the G sharp. Okay, so to go from measure 1 to measure 2, if you do want to try playing this as well, you're just moving the bottom note down 1/2 step. Okay, everything else stays where it's at. So if we play that, that would be down low. I'll stay down there just to make sure we're accurate on this. So staying down low down there, now we just need to figure out what this chord is. Okay, so again, we need to get rid of doubles. We can see in both hands we have an E. Again, I have more in my right hand, so I'm going to get rid of my left hand. You can also see that we have a G sharp in both hands, so I'm going to get rid again of my left hand. So that one's off the hook there. Great. Okay. Then, like before, if we get rid of sharps, what we're going to be looking at is I'm going to move my middle finger down to C, okay, and my thumb down to G. Now, if we take a look at that, we can see we're not in root position, okay? We need to reconfigure the order of the notes that we're playing to get it so that we're stacked every other note. Here again, since we have 2 in between, that tells us we just need to reconfigure it. So what I'm going to do is let's try taking the G and moving it up the octave. Okay, that's what I mean by reconfiguring the chord. We're just going to set it up in a different order than what it is. Right now we've got G, C, E. I'm going to shift everything up so I keep the C and the E, and then I get the G on top. Okay, now we can see we've got every other note there. Okay, so that tells us we are in a root position here with the C on bottom. Now we just need to plug the sharps back in. Okay, so pull that C sharp back up and pull the G back up. All right, now we can figure out what are we, major or minor, or what's the quality of our chord here. So again, 4 is going to give us major. We're not going to count the very bottom note. If we start here with 1, 2, 3, we can see we only have 3 half steps between our bottom note and our middle note, which means we have a minor chord. Okay, so this is called C sharp minor is our chord. And because we came from this, right, we call those chord inversions. Because we shifted the G up, we need to shift it right back down. And again, the left hand has that shape down there as well. Technically, this is going to be C sharp minor over the G sharp. okay? Because it's not the C sharp on bottom, even though we're calling it a C sharp chord. We need to indicate that it's a different note on bottom other than the C sharp. Okay, so what does that look like? On the page, the way we write that is we would say C sharp minor. Okay, that would be a lowercase m. Let me rewrite that so it looks lowercase. Great. Okay, so C sharp minor over the G sharp. And that is what that little slash means. If you're ever curious about why are there those slashes when we're looking at those chord changes, it just means you have a certain chord on the top and your bottommost note is different than the chord than what you're playing. Okay. In this case, it does belong to the chord. We do need a G sharp in our C sharp minor chord, but it just happens to be the lowest note. Cool. Okay, that one's a hefty one. The rest of them aren't quite as hefty as that one. Let's continue on. So again, that's the same situation as the first measure. So basically we've gone from A, and then we go down to the C sharp minor, just like that. Okay, cool. Great. Looking at the third measure here, let's work through it. Same thing with the bass clef. So here we've got all spaces, but to get our first note here, we do need to think about our line note and then just walk it down one. So again, bass clef lines, we're going to think good burritos don't fall apart. So here's our good there, and then here's our G, and we're just walking it down one to the F. Okay, my iPad flipped. There we go. Great. Okay, so we know that that's going to be an F, and again, since it's an F sharp in the key signature, we just need to tack a sharp on. Cool. All right, then we can use all cows eat grass, right? Those are spaces for the bass. So all cows. So we know that that next one is going to be a C. And again, we need a sharp for the C. Cool. All right. Oops, I keep doing that. Okay, next up, again, let's work backwards for these. We're just looking again at those first three notes, and then we've got the whole measure. So looking at the top note here to start, again, in our treble clef, we're going to think F, A, C, E. Okay, so our very first space is going to be the F. Then, of course, with our key signature, we need an F sharp. Great. We've talked about this note quite a bit. Hopefully you're recognizing this. This one is going to be a C, and specifically C, middle C. And of course, C is also going to get the sharp. Great. And well, let's work through the next one. This one's a tough one to grab. So the next one, we can anchor on the C. So that one right there is going to be the C. Then we need to think backwards. Zoom in even more so you can see my little dot. So, okay, so then we need to think backwards. So C, and then the note before C is going to be B. So that would be that space there. Then the note before B is going to be A. So that's going to be that line, the middle line. Okay. If we go down another one, down to the next space, we can see that that's going to be the G. And one more is going to give us an F. And of course, with our key signature, we need the F sharp. So you can see that everything is going to be sharp through this measure. Okay. So then again, let's go back to finding our notes, finding our doubles. You know what? I'm going to take these guys both and shift them up. Hopefully I can do them both at the same time. All right, I'll go one at a time and hope that I can get them matched up again. Okay, awesome. Great. So again, we've got the F sharp down there. We also need the C sharp. Okay, then the right hand comes in. Now here's my middle C. I'm going to pull in that F sharp below middle C. Second finger goes on the middle C, C sharp, right? And then we also need the F sharp on top. So literally just F sharps and C sharps. Okay, so let's get rid of some doubles. Again, we've got a lot in the right hand. I can just get rid of that left hand, right? We can see that everything's doubling up. Let me also get rid of the top F sharp here. Okay, so we're left with this. Again, let's go ahead and get rid of sharps for a moment. So we're going to pull everything down to white notes. Then we can kind of start to see this, right? Our goal is to get this into root position. So we're playing every other note. You can see all we're missing there is the A. Okay, and that gives us our chord that we need. Now, of course, we need to pop the sharps back up. So bring the F back to F sharp. Pinky goes back to C sharp. Okay, so there's our chord. Then again, we're going to find that bottom note, count our half steps. If it's 4, it's major. If it's 3, it's minor. Okay, we're not going to count the very bottom note. We're going to think 1, 2, 3, and we can see that this chord is going to be F sharp minor. Okay, cool. Again, it's implied. There's something in music called implied chords. Okay, that's if we are missing something in the chord and we have to just like figure it out. Here, we're just adding in the A and assuming that we're missing that. Okay, and just calling it F sharp minor. Also, one other note on that is we know that it is an A and not A sharp or A flat or anything like that, just because A is natural in the key signature, right? It's only the F, C, and the G that we need to sharp. So we know that it's going to be A natural there. All right, awesome. So that chord there is going to be F sharp minor. We only have one more to go through here. So F sharp minor, and because the F sharp is on bottom for the left hand, we don't need to say slash or over or anything like that. Okay, awesome. All right, the very last one. Again, we got to work through some notes here first. Let's do bass clef again first. To get to our very first note, again, we want to think good burritos don't fall apart for the lines, all cows eat grass for the spaces. So let's use good burritos don't fall apart to get our very first note. So there would be the good, right? Then again, we just need to work our way backwards. So G, and then the note right before G would be the F. Okay, that's that other dot in this guy here in the space. We now need the next line note. So F would take us to E, and then to get to our last space note would be the D down there. Okay, so we're going to write D for that one. Great. Again, spaces, we're thinking all cows eat grass. So we just know that that very first one is going to be the A. Awesome. The next one, you might recognize this note. We have seen this a couple of times, but let's work through it. Let's pretend we haven't seen it. So we know, or hopefully at this point, we know that this guy right here is going to be the C. Okay, so let's work backwards from the C. So we know there's the C. The space inside would be the B. And then one more line down would be the A. So we know that that's going to be the A for the very first one. Great. This guy here, if you're not sure what that note is, what we can do is think again about the bottom line. So for treble clef, again, we're thinking every good boy does fine. So there's the E for the line, and then we just step it down one to get ourselves to the D. Okay, so there's D for that one. And then again, for spaces, we're going to think F-A-C-E. So here's the F for that one. And of course, with our key signature, we need the F sharp. All right, awesome. Let's work this one out. So again, looking at the bass clef, yeah, you can still see those down there just barely. Hopefully that's coming through on the video. So we've got the D all the way down. In fact, just to make sure, let me play this up the octave. So we've got D and A. Okay. Then we've also got A in the right hand. Pop that up the octave as well. Okay. Then we've got D and the F sharp. Ooh, we're losing me here each place. So let me pop it down. Let's see, D, A, then A, D, F sharp. Okay, that should work out well. Cool, okay. Again, let's go ahead and get rid of some doubles. So here we can see we've got double A's. I'm gonna get rid of the left hand since, again, there's more in my right hand up here. Let's get rid of the D since I already have one in the right hand. And let's get rid of sharps, okay? Tell us, are we in root position for this? We can see we've got two notes in the middle, so we are not in root position. Okay, so we need to reconfigure the chord. This time, let's try going down. So what if we take the F and shift it down here? Okay, so I'm just gonna keep everything down like it is, just reconfigure my fingers, keep F in mind. We're still not in root position, right? We still need to go somewhere. We've still got two notes in between and we're not stacking it like every other note. So let's try one more. Okay, let's take the D. Again, we're going to keep all the fingers on the notes that we have already so we don't lose them, and then bring the D in, and there's our root position. Okay, so we've got every other note there. We do need the F sharp in play. Okay, and then we can count our half steps. So here's the D. We're not going to count that one, and we're going to think 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, 4 is going to give us major. So we've got a D major for that chord. Again, since D is the bottom note here, we can just call it a straight up D major. We don't need to say over anything. So just that C sharp chord. Cool. And again, since it's major, just the D is totally fine. If you do want to write your M-A-J there, that's totally fine as well. Or you could finish out that full word. Okay, cool. All right. So those are all of your chords. Now, I will go ahead and say that just repeats the whole way through. I did mean to get onto the melody here as well, but I think I'm going to pause here for today because that's plenty for us to talk about. And then next time I'll do another class here on the melody and just how the melody fits in with all the chords. Why does the melody make sense and all that kind of stuff. So, all right, awesome. If you have any questions, please let me know. And I will see you again in the next class. All right, thanks.